We continue now at the top of Daf Tzadi Heyam at Beis in Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 95b. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing the halacha in the Mishnah that again, if a garment gets the blood of a carbon chatas upon it, the halacha is that it has to be washed in the azara. But the problem is that there are 7 detergents that are supposed to be used in the washing of that garment, and one of the detergents is urine, it's meirag, and that's not allowed to be brought into the azara. So how is it possible to wash the garment properly? And the Gemara now continues and says, "V'chitem," if you're going to say, "Demivla lehu bahade shiva samimonim," what he does is he takes the urine and you actually just mix it, you absorb it within the other 7 detergents, meaning all of those detergents are all together. Essentially, there's a total of 7, including the meiraglayim, but you're going to mix them all together. Umaver lehu lekulhu kechad, and then you apply them all at once. And if you would bring it into the azara in a mixture, that would not be a problem. But that is not a good solution because of V'hatanan, but we learned in a Mishnah, Haviran shalo kesidron, if let's say the detergents are used out of order, O shehavir shivasan ke'echad, or let's say he does all 7 at once, lo asav v'lo klum, then he hasn't done anything. That's not the proper way to wash, and so therefore that's not going to be a solution. And v'chitem, and if you're going to say, Demivla lehu bahad echad misamimon, maybe just take the meiraglayim and put it with one of the detergents, mix it together. V'atzarach lechaskes shalosh pa'amim b'chol echad v'echad, but the halacha is that you have to rub the stain. It's talking there in Meseches Nida about the kesem, about kesamim, about stains, but you have to rub them 3 times with each detergent. Tanan, that's what it says in the Mishnah in Meseches Nida. And so therefore that will not be a solution either. If you're going to mix the meiraglayim with one of the other detergents, you're not going to be doing shalosh ba'amim b'chol echad v'echad. And so the Gemara continues and answers, Ela demivla lehu berok tapel. What the person does is he puts the meiraglayim together with the rok tapel, that is the tasteless spit. The Amar Reish Lakish, because Reish Lakish says rok tapel tzarech shiei im kol echad v'echad, that actually the rok tapel is actually mixed with every one of the detergents, and therefore the meiraglayim is included in that. And again, if it's in a mixture, it's not a problem of bringing it into the azara. Rashi explains, Hachei Garcinan v'chitema demivlalu bahade shiva samimonin umaverlu l'kulu kechad. You'll do them all at once. And then it said shalo kesidron, out of order, keseder shein shnuyin b'mishnah. It has to be in the order that they're taught in the Mishnah. Zachar zeh keseder havarasan. Again, one after the other. Tzarech l'chaskes. Again, the halach is that you have to rub tzarech l'shavshef hakesem. You have to rub the stain shlosha pa'amim b'chol echad v'echad 3 times for every detergent. V'hachei amrinan b'nida. And this is what we say in Meseches Nida. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Echad shebishal bo, v'echad she'ira l'socha. Again, the halacha is that if within a vessel the chatos, let's say, was cooked, so then the halacha is that if it's a metal vessel, the halacha is that it has to be scoured and rinsed, and if it's an earthenware vessel, then it has to be broken. And the Mishnah now is saying it doesn't matter if it was cooked within it. Let's say the chatos was cooked in the vessel, and it could also be, let's say, it was poured, v'echad she'ira l'socha roseach, it was poured in boiling hot into the vessel. That also, even if it wasn't actually cooked in the vessel, but it was boiling hot and poured into the vessel, the same halacha applies. And the Mishnah continues, Echad kodshe hakodshim, v'echad kodshim kalim, tu'unin marika u'shtifa. The halacha of marika and shtifa, again scouring and rinsing, which applies by metal vessels, that applies both by kodshe kodshim and kodshim kalim. It is not limited to carbon chatos. Rabbi Shimon says, kodshim kalim, ein tu'unin marika u'shtifa. Kodshim kalim, which are the less holy types of karbonos, they do not require marika and shtifa. And we will note, Rashi mentioned this earlier, this halacha that it's not only by carbon chatos that we say tu'un and mariko shtifa, that halacha, Rashi says that's true also when it comes to the halacha of kli cheres, that it's not limited to carbon chatos by kli cheres as well, but that is a discussion among the commentaries. Rashi explains, Rabbi Shimon Omer Kodshim Kalim. Again, Rabbi Shimon says that Kodshim Kalim don't need Mariko Shtifa, v'Gemara Mefarish time. And the Gemara will explain the reason why Rabbi Shimon says Kodshim Kalim don't need Mariko Shtifa. And Rashi notes, Vim Tomer, if you're going to ask the following question, Hare Habolua Nasa Noser, forget about this whole halach in the pasuk about Marika and Shtifa. What about the fact that whatever becomes absorbed in the walls of the vessel, it will eventually become Noser, because it's going to be past the allotted time. Upolto Beheter Lachar Zman, and so therefore you're going to have to be polto. The halach is you're going to have to get it out of those walls through doing some kind of kashering process. And to that Rashi says, Modi Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon actually would admit to boy hagola beroslin, that you need to do hagola, which is usually using boiling hot water for a kashering process. So that Rabbi Shimon agrees to. Umitoras marika ushtifa hu demamitle. He's only excluding the specific halachas of marika and shtifa. There still would have to be kashering for the vessels, even Sinan by Kodshim Kalim. Kidim Tar Sinan beGemara gabe Truma, like we're going to answer in the Gemara by Truma lo nitzrachol lechedo amar mar b'mayim velo b'yayin b'mayim velo b'mazog ho afilu b'yayin v'afilu b'mazog. There's halacha by Marika Shtifa. It has to be specifically with water, according to Rabbi Shimon by Kodshim Kalim. That specific limitation or specific halacha doesn't apply in terms of Kodshim Kalim, because there's no halacha Mariko Shtifa. You just have to do whatever satisfies the halacha of Hagola. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis taught Asher Tavushal Bo. So again, it says that the vessel was used to cook within the vessel. That's what the pasuk says. We'll take a look at the full pasuk. It says Uchli Cheres Asher Tavushal Bo Yishaver. Talks about Kli Cheres, which is cooked inside of it. It should be broken. Vim Bechli Nechoshes Bushala, and then let's say it's cooked in Kli Nechoshes. Umorak Veshutaf V'Mayim. It says again Umorak Veshutaf V'Mayim. So that's what the pasuk says. And so the Brisa says Ein Li Ela Shabishal Bo. I only know if it's cooked in it. Ira l'socha roseach minayin. How do we know this halacha applies also if it's poured in boiling hot? The same halacha applies. Talmud lomar v'asher tavushal bo yishaver. The pasuk says v'asher tavushal bo yishaver, and so therefore from that extra pasuk we learn this halacha. And Rashi explains hachi garsinan b'Toras Kohanim. This is the text in Toras Kohanim. Ira l'socha roseach minayin. Talmud lomar asher bo yishaver. Again, if he pours in there boiling hot, how do we know the halacha applies there? We learn that from the pasuk. Rashi explains the drasha midasamach yishaver etzel bo. Since the word yishaver is by the word bo, v'lo chasav im bechli cheres tevushal yishaver. It doesn't just say im bechli cheres tevushal yishaver. Lemidrash im nivla bo mikol makom yishaver. It's in order to make a drasha that any kind of absorption, we have this halacha of yishaver, that it has to be broken. That's again the derivation being made by the Bryce. It says v'asher tevushal bo yishaver. That comes to include ira l'socho roseach. And the Gemara continues, boy Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama asks the following question: to lo'u ba'avir tanur mahu. What about in a situation where a person would suspend it in the airspace of the oven and essentially roast it in the oven? The case over here is that it is in fact being roasted within this vessel, but it's not being absorbed in the walls of the vessel. Does the halacha of Mariko Shtifa, or breaking it if it's earthenware, does that apply in such a case? And the Gemara explains the question. Abishal ubiluahu dekavod rachmana. Is the pasuk just being strict about the fact that it's cooked or absorbed in the walls? O dilma abishal below bilua, or maybe even if you have bishal, in this case roasting, but there is no absorption, maybe the halach applies in that situation as well. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava, Rava says, Tashma, come in here a proof from our Mishnah. Echad shabishal bo v'echad she'ira l'socha roseach. It says, whether it's cooked in the vessel or whether poured in hot into the vessel, the halach applies in both situations. And the Gemara is assuming the same would be true. Let's say it's cooked, but it doesn't absorb. But the Gemara says, no, balua below bishal lo kami boilan. We're not asking if it's absorbed without being cooked in the vessel. That we understand from the Mishnah. Ki kami boilan, but the question for us is, bishal below bilua. Again, when it's cooked and there's no absorption, so again, what is the halacha? Back to the original question. And the Gemara says, Tashma, come in here the following proof. The Amar of Nachman, Amar Rabba Bar Avua, because Rav Nachman says that Rabba Bar Avua says, Tanur shel mikdash shel mateches hoy. It says that the tanur in the mikdash was shel mateches, it was made out of metal. Rashi explains, shel mateches hoy, kasal gadaitach. Initially, the Gemara thinks, why was it made out of metal and not made out of earthenware? Because they would do exactly this. They would roast the chatas, and it would not get absorbed, but they would still roast the chatas within it. And so if it would be made of earthenware, then it would have to be broken, and that would be problematic. So it's better it's made of metal, so then it just needs marika and shtifa, that it's soured and it's rinsed. And so that's the reason why it's made out of metal. And again, the point over here is it would seem that just roasting inside it is enough in order to set these halachas in motion. If it should enter your mind that, let's say, it's a situation of cooking without absorption, then in that case these halachas don't apply. Why not make it of earthenware? And the Gemara says, no, there was a different reason. Since you have the remainder of karban mincha, those were baked in the oven, and so there, there you already have cooking and absorption, so avdinan shel mateches, it's better to make it from metal, that way it's able to be kashered. Rashi explains, bishul uvelua shemen hamincha, again by the mincha you have this absorption, and so therefore in such a situation, it could come to noser, it needs to be kashered, and therefore it's better that it is made made of metal. And the Gemara continues, Hahu tanura da'atchu ba tichaya. There was an oven, it was smeared with fat. The fat came from the tail of an animal. And Asra Rabba bar Ahiloi prohibited lemechla l'rifta liolam, to eat from bread forever that was made in that oven. And the issue was that that bread essentially would absorb the taste of the meat. It would become fleishik bread, and fleishik bread in general is prohibited. And va'afilu b'milcha, even if the person would eat the bread not with dairy, let's say the person would eat the bread with salt, that also would be prohibited, because dil ma'asi lemechla b'kuscha, because there was a concern maybe you're going to end up eating that bread with kuscha, which was a dairy kind of dip, and so therefore this kind of fleishik bread is going to be forbidden. And the point is that the oven forever is forbidden, any bread that is made in that oven. Essentially, there's no way to kasher that oven. And the Gemara continues, Mesechet, we have a question from the following Brisa, Ein loshen esa isa b'cholav, you're not allowed to knead dough with milk. V'im loshen, if the person does knead the dough with milk, kol hapas kula asura, all of the bread is forbidden. Again, mivnei hergel avera, because we're afraid he's going to be accustomed to doing an avera. He's going to end up having this bread, which is dairy, together with meat. And kayotze bo, the Brisa continues, similarly, ein toshen es hatanor ba'alya, you can't smear the oven with tail. Again, that's like the case we just had above. V'im toshen, if he does do that, if he smears with the fat of the tail, kol hapas kula asura, all of the bread made in the oven is going to be forbidden. Ad sheyasik es hatanor, until he burns out the oven. When he burns out the oven, apparently that is an effective way of kashering the oven. That goes against what we just said above, that you can't kasher the oven. And the Gemara says, Tiyufta de Rabba bar Ahiloi, should we say that's a refutation of Rabba bar Ahiloi? And the Gemara says, Tiyufta, indeed, that is a refutation. And the Gemara continues, Amrle Ravina l'Ravashi, Ravina said to Ravashi, V'chimeachar di tosav Rabba bar Ahiloi, but once we now see that Rabba bar Ahiloi is refuted, so Amai Omar Rav, so why did Rav say, Kedeiros ba Pesach yishavru? He said that Kedeiros, if you have pots on Pesach, that they have to be broken. Why did he say they have to be broken? Apparently there is a way to kasher. Why is it that they have to be broken? Amar Lei said to him, Rav muki lo ahi b'shal mateches. Rav will say that case is talking where they're made out of metal. What we're referring to over here is that the brisa above, where it says kashering is a possibility, that's talking where it's made out of metal. When it says yasik es tanur, so something that's made out of metal, if the tanur is made out of metal, then you can kasher it. And when Rav said that the kideiros by Pesach have to be yishavru, that was talking where it was made out of earthenware, and so therefore kashering was not possible. And the Gemara continues, Viboy same, if you want, we can say another answer, Betana shel cheres. Actually, the brisa above is talking about a tanur, an oven made of cheres. It actually is made of earthenware. And so then we are back to the question against what Rav said, because it said in the brisa that the earthenware tanur is able to be kashered, but Rav said kedeiros on Pesach. Let's say before Pesach they were used with chametz. It's not possible to kasher, you have to break them. And so therefore, how do we answer the question? We can answer as follows, Zeh haseko mibifnim, v'zeh haseko mibachutz. When it comes to an oven, you can make the fire inside of the oven, and that will be strong enough to cleanse it, to kasher it. But when it comes to the Kederos on Pesach, the fire is on the outside, and therefore that is not going to cleanse it. It will not kasher it properly. But the Gemara asks, V'navid hasalka mibifnim. But why not, in the case of the Kederos, why not do the fire on the inside, and then you'll be able to kasher it? And the Gemara says to that, Chayes alayud mitavri. The person is going to be concerned for the Kederos that they will break, and therefore he's going to limit how much fire he's really going to use. He really isn't going to kasher it properly. That's why it doesn't work by Kederos. And the Gemara continues and notes, Hilkach, therefore, Haikuvi, when it comes to earthenware tile that also is used to bake upon there, Haseko mibachutzu, that's something where the fire is on the outside, V'yasr, and it will be prohibited. And Rashi explains, Kuvya, again, Ra'afim, these earthenware tiles, Chalulim, and they were hollow, Kamin Shvisas Kedera, like the place where you would set a pot, Upa'amim shetachenos an shemen v'ofen bolechem, sometimes they would smear them with fat, and they would bake some bread on it, Hakori Tichya, that was called Tichya, and again, that's Haseko mibachutz, and therefore it is usher, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Vav Amud Aleph.